Merci beaucoup. On va enchaîner avec le rôle d'une organisation qui porte sur un domaine autre, tout autre, avec Giuseppe SERNIA qui parlera en anglais, qui travaille à l'Office des Nations Unies sur la drogue et le crime, qui va nous parler du rôle de cette organisation, la matière. Je vais lancer le PowerPoint.
Merci. Oui, je vais parler en anglais parce que c'est peut-être facile pour moi, vu que je suis italien. Alors, en UDC, UNODC is the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. So we deal basically with supporting with technical assistance member states in addressing organized crime under the ANTOC Convention, of which we are custodian. ANTOC Convention, which is the Palermo Convention signed in Palermo, and is targeting organized crime. Then the ANCAC Convention, Convention Against Corruption, the Vienna Convention on Drug Trafficking, and recently also the Cybercrime Convention, which is still now open for signatures. Now, the structure of UNODC doesn't provide for environmental crime or climate change in its DNA, I would say. And it's an evolution which comes with the importance of environmental crime in our societies. So originally, organized crime was the typical organized crime, but as a Southern Italian, I've known ecomafia. And today, we can certainly say that the organized crime involved, the business of environmental crime is as much important as drug trafficking would be probably in business terms. Now, the legal instruments which the ANTOC Convention offers can be adapted to be used in cases of environmental crime. And of course, environmental crime is basically protection of biodiversity, And biodiversity is a major mitigating factor for climate change. In the future, we may also think about directly looking into climate change factors which are different from biodiversity as aggravating circumstances or other elements which today seems to be too much science fiction. We're also working, so the ANTOC has several protocols. One is on armed trafficking, another is smuggling of migrants, another is on human trafficking. And the fourth protocol on which we are working is the protocol on environmental crime. That's because environmental crime is becoming every day more important, and the importance of using tools which are born for addressing big organized crime is also coming to the attention of the General Assembly, has been coming to the attention of the General Assembly for many years now. We had several calls for considering serious crimes which affect the environment. Originally, it was much more related with wildlife trafficking, today much more expanded to other areas. And of course, the maritime space is a space on which I work. I'm a maritime crime expert, if you want. Maybe expert is a big term, a maritime crime specialist. And I do work in Libya. Now, if I tell you Libya and Central Mediterranean, the first crime you would be thinking is smuggling of migrants. Before, I was working in Nigeria. I also covered Senegal, Gabon, but Nigeria, I tell you Nigeria, the first crime you think is piracy, right? Now, these crimes have a strong relation with climate change and have a strong relation with environmental crime. Well, first, Nigeria. Piracy is basically the offspring of environmental degradation. The Niger Delta has been affected by oil exploitation. We had basically revolutions in the 2005 and following on because of the fact that in the Wari region, the life expectation is 43 years. So if I have a life expectation of 43 years, I'm going to go for piracy. I would do it. Yeah, I'm going to the slide later, within the 15 minutes. So basically, we see that environmental degradation brings organized crime. And organized crime, at the same time, affecting biodiversity, brings climate change. At the same time, climate change brings organized crime. Why? Senegal, acidification, drop in fishery stocks. The populations, they do resort to a different typology of criminal activities. There is a lot of cocaine coming from South America. Fishing vessels are used also for transshipment from larger vessels coming from South America. And this is done because basically these fishing vessels are not used anymore. 20,000 fishing vessels for artisanal fishing in Senegal have been always the resource of the local population. Today, these 20,000 do not have the same amount of fish, and that's due to overexploitation, but also acidification. That's due to the fact that fishery stocks are falling and the population goes into a different typology of activities to sustain themselves. So there is this link between organized crime, climate change, environmental crime. Nigeria still, the mangroves are well depleted, depleted because of climate change. We may lose up to 70% of mangroves. The Niger Delta population lives in mangroves. And this population does fishery in mangroves. So the day we will have more mangroves depletion, we will have this population which will emigrate or find other alternative, economical alternative, which is not oil exploitation, because the oil exploitation doesn't come to them. It's going to be potentially an additional risk of organized crime stepping in. So again, the link between climate security and climate change. Libya, smuggling of migrants, trafficking in person. Smuggling of migrants is also a climate change phenomenon, right? We have a large amount of population because of the desertification of the Sahel coming down, because of acidification and blah, blah. Basically, we have a large amount of people which are leaving their countries of origin and moving towards Europe. They pass through Libya, mostly because of a crisis which is also due probably to the impact of oil exploitation over governance during the course of years, and not only, of course, but that's one of the components. Similar to Nigeria, where governance has been radically impacted by oil exploitation. So in Libya, we have a large amount of people moving across the sea. So even if we think about crimes which are not at all related with climate change or environmental crime, we see that there is a phenomenon of connection between this different typology of criminal activities and the phenomenon of climate change. Now, if we look into how we work in preventing, as UNODC, climate change, we look into environmental crime. I don't know how much time I have, 5 minutes more. So the environmental crime is, coming back at the beginning, environmental crime was not originally in the UNODC mandate. It comes with the General Assembly with increased sensibility to the problem. Today we are producing a fourth protocol, but the key point is also looking around and see in the maritime space which typology of maritime environmental crime are impacting, are determining also certain component of climate change. And of course, we look into biodiversity, we look into the capture capacity of the oceans, and we look into phytoplankton maybe, and phytoplankton will cap between 30 and 40% of human produce CO2 because of the photosynthesis, and we discussed also this with Céline. So biodiversity, the biomass, protecting the biomass of the oceans means also maintaining this 30-40% working. And how do you protect the biomass of the ocean? Also through criminal justice, which is not something we normally talk about, also because the UNCLOS, which has been conceived in a period of not this level of sensitivity we have today. UNCLOS has been, UNCLOS, United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, has been conceived in a period where it was the 80s. In Italy, we had Berlusconi, so that's it all, right? 80s, now a bit later, right? But in any case, that was the 80s of the disco dance, the 80s of the priority of the capital exploitation over maybe environmental protection. Even if Part 12, with all the merits we can speak about it, it's still giving us a strong limit in terms of implementing criminal justice on the maritime space. And the maritime space is also a space where humans do not live. So for us, it's also difficult to perceive how much we could consider criminal justice on the maritime space, simply because it's not a place where humans are able to visualize themselves and so apply criminal justice. Now, the point is that the limitation in applying criminal justice to the fishery crimes or crimes in the fishery sector, the limitation in applying criminal justice to pollution crimes at sea, we have often calls to not consider pollution crimes at sea as a crime. Because some believe that throwing 300 tons of toxic waste in the maritime space may not be considered a crime because there is not an immediate anthropocentric damage. We are not immediately suffering from nuclear waste disposed on the maritime space. We are impacted by this, not directly. Now, this typology of conversation will lose with time. That's what I believe, because with time we will realize that protecting biodiversity is an anthropocentric interest because of the importance of climate change and impact of this typology of crimes on climate change. But the real question remains that today the framework in which we operate is extremely limited. If you imagine, and I'm probably skipping the presentation entirely, if you imagine imagine yourself, you are a captain going at sea, a master going at sea on a fishing vessel and throwing 300 tons of toxic waste in a BB&J. Who's gonna come to get you? So first, BB&J management comes under a provision which needs to be developed under the COP once we will have MPA beyond national jurisdiction, right? So at a certain moment, we will need to establish an enforcement method, and we will need to establish also who's going to get you if you go and throw 300 tons of toxic waste in a marine protected area. Most probably nobody. Maybe the flag state. If anybody knows a case where the flag state has been prosecuting for a maritime environmental crime, tell me, because I'm not aware of it. And maybe your country or nationality. If I do it as an Italian, maybe Italy will come and prosecute me because I am Italian and I'm polluting, and maybe there is not a specific definition in terms of the territory in which I'm polluting. It's the action conducted by the individual which may become the criminal jurisdictional link. But the limitations in terms of criminal justice on the maritime space augment as far we go from the coast, and then as far we are in legiferating in the future marine protected area national jurisdiction will find us facing the fact that implementing this legislation will be extremely difficult, and environmental crime will probably come in a scope where not only our criminal justice but also our capacity to actually enforce and detect the illicit activity will be difficult to envisage. In the future, we will have to consider the fact that the maritime space will be increasingly more protected through a combination of technologies and innovative criminal justice tools, including flag state jurisdiction, because we are increasingly recognizing the due diligence of flag states, right? So we have a 2016 ITLOS advisory opinion, which is focusing on the due diligence of the flag state for IU fishing, but that's a typology of reasoning we can expand to any sort of conservatory regime. So we will need to find tools to make the flag state also responsible for implementing criminal legislation, because in the end, IU fishing will have to be considered one day also a crime, more than we do it today with all the limitation of Article 73 of UNCLOS. We will need to start thinking into the maritime exploitation as something which needs also to be protected through the criminal justice tools. Not only, of course, and not towards the small fishes, but the big ones, organized criminal groups beyond maybe the beneficial ownership architecture of the maritime fishing industry, and maybe targeting those organized criminal groups which are hidden behind the maritime exploitation. Over, thanks.
You will have 5 minutes now if you want.
Maybe there are questions.
Okay. Thank you so much for respecting the timing. On va changer la table, mais peut-être avant je ne sais pas si Thomas, tu as 5 minutes. Peut-être qu'on peut prendre juste 2 questions avant de faire venir les intervenantes qui suivent. Si vous avez des questions spécifiquement sur ces présentations-là. Et puis sinon, ensuite, on changera la table ronde. Mais en tout cas, c'est un domaine, effectivement, dont on parle assez peu. Enfin, on fait très peu ce lien avec le changement climatique et c'est vraiment passionnant.
C'est intéressant aussi que les aires marines protégées, il y a 2% des aires marines protégées qui sont effectivement protégées. Il y a une énorme quantité d'aires marines protégées qui sont des paper en anglais. Et là, c'est une question aussi d'enforcement and compliance. And the criminal justice.
D'ailleurs, des questions sur les 3 interventions, puisque normalement, Frédéric est encore avec nous, mais sinon, on peut les garder pour plus tard. Oui.
Plutôt des interrogations. Si je comprends bien, alors, la dernière intervention, so you try to make a link, right, between migrations and the question about crimes, if I understand your intervention. And yeah, you have took the case of Libya and Nigeria also. So you think that this link that you made between environment destruction and also this question of mass migration of peoples could lead in some ways to the creation of a kind of crime which can be maybe discussed and even if be possible to be used for a trial, for example? Or do you have an example or not at all? Or the debate is ongoing and there is no answer yet?
Look, the migration for smugglers, so there is a protocol on smuggling of migrants. Smuggling of migrants is a criminal activity per se. The migrants are for smugglers commodities, basically. They are commodities moving also because of climate change, not only, of course. And these commodities, because they are considered commodities, sometimes we even move into the trafficking in person, even more commoditizing the individual. Are what the organized crime uses for their business. So, as a matter of fact, we are seeing a combination of factors which leads to an increase of organized crime because of climate change. I mean, even if we look into the Mediterranean coastline, all the fishery crisis from the Egyptian large amount of fishing vessels, we are talking of a large industry which is underexploited today. All these vessels are the ones used in a large series also of criminal activities, including smuggling of migrants. The Adriana case was an Egyptian fishing vessel, which was basically disposed for the smuggling operation. And then it was in such a poor state and overcrowded so much, this led to 700 people dying. Now, is this going to come in terms of court use? Yeah, possibly one day. Climate change one day maybe become a matter for forensic evidence also. Not only for smuggling of migrants, not only for organized crime, but any sort of criminal procedure which will work on climate change will probably use also scientific evidence to as an evidentiary value. Not today, maybe in the future.
Si ça y est, ça veut dire qu'en ligne, ils m'entendent. Moi, j'avais une question de curiosité pour tous les 3. Parce que vous avez parlé d'organisations que je ne connais pas forcément très bien. Je voulais savoir où en étaient les débats, en fait, à la fois pour les énergies renouvelables ou à l'OACI. Est-ce qu'il y a des débats en ce moment au sein de ces organisations qui permettraient de faire un peu évoluer la question ou pas du tout, parce qu'on en est simplement à appliquer les instruments qui ont déjà été adoptés. Et pour l'UNODC, je voulais juste savoir où en était ce protocole, où on en est dans les négociations pour l'adoption du protocole sur les crimes environnementaux.
Alors du côté de l'OACI, alors je ne sais pas si la question porte sur les carburants alternatifs, par exemple, et les discussions actuellement sur les carburants alternatifs ou les biocarburants. En fait, ce qui m'a marqué depuis que j'observe les négociations à l'OACI, c'est que toutes les négociations sont axées sur le fait qu'il faut arriver au moment où on pourra utiliser ce type de carburant. Et en fait, les autres mesures prises sont plutôt des mesures qui ont une philosophie de mesure temporaire, en disant, vu qu'on va mettre un certain temps à y arriver, il faut adopter des mesures qui permettent une forme de correction et une forme d'incitation pour un jour arriver à l'usage de ces carburants qui ne sont pas aujourd'hui déployables dans le cadre de l'aviation civile, notamment du transport de passagers. Donc c'est cette idée que ça doit être l'objectif final, mais on ne sait absolument pas quand est-ce qu'on va y arriver, et que l'OACI ne veut pas être accusé de ne rien faire en attendant, et donc développe un certain nombre de mesures du type Corsia. Mais Corsia, on voit bien que c'est un engagement quand même sur quelque chose où on montre beaucoup, on en parle beaucoup. Le secteur de l'aviation, qui est le premier secteur à adopter une mesure fondée sur le marché, applicable de manière à l'échelle onusien. Donc il y a beaucoup de choses autour de ça, mais ça reste une mesure de compensation carbone en fait. Et donc on ne va pas vers les taxes parce que pour le coup, ça c'est, je pense, très mal compris qu'il y a un conflit de normes en fait. On ne peut pas, on risque une violation directe de la Convention de Chicago si on propose une taxe sur le carburant. Et donc l'OACI a contourné par de l'interprétation évolutive, sans en parler, sans dire que c'est de l'interprétation évolutive, alors que je pense qu'il y avait d'autres façons de dire que qu'au final il n'y avait peut-être pas de conflit, parce qu'une mesure fondée sur le marché, c'est pas une taxe. Mais donc du coup il y a quelque chose qui est un espèce d'entre-deux, et donc les discussions sont continues, mais c'est sans qu'on sache vraiment à quelle échelle de temps et à quel moment on va pouvoir déployer des solutions qui permettront vraiment, pour le coup, de même viser une poursuite de la croissance du transport aérien, parce que c'est un petit peu ça l'idée, le côté un peu magique de trouver la solution qui permettra de continuer que le transport aérien puisse poursuivre son développement sans émettre de gaz à effet de serre. Donc c'est le paradigme, en fait, on ne l'a pas changé. Pour l'instant, il n'y a pas de changement de paradigme au sein de l'OACI. Le mandat de l'OACI, c'est un développement sûr et ordonné, mais un développement de l'aviation civile internationale. Et pour l'instant, on n'est pas revenu sur ce mandat-là. Et donc, quelque chose qui a été négocié en 1944. Au moment vraiment, mais c'était même pas à la fin de la Seconde Guerre mondiale qu'on avait déjà posé ce qu'il y avait dans la Convention de Chicago, et on n'est pas revenu sur ce principe-là. Tant qu'on ne reviendra pas sur ce principe-là, c'est l'espoir qu'un jour des carburants alternatifs permettront de poursuivre sans impact carbone, et tant qu'on n'y arrive pas, on essaye de dire qu'on fait des choses qui permettent, ce qui me semble un peu pour moi des pis-aller, mais c'est mon avis.
Ça s'adressait aussi à Frédéric. Peut-être.
Oui, je vais essayer de relancer ma vidéo. J'espère que ça fonctionne.
Ça fonctionne.
Voilà. Oui, merci pour cette question. Alors pour les énergies renouvelables, on va dire que le tempo est celui est celui qui est imprimé par les négociations, notamment climatiques, puisque chaque agence va tenter de faire valoir ses priorités, plutôt la promotion des énergies renouvelables pour l'IRENA et vraiment la sécurité des approvisionnements énergétiques, toute énergie confondue pour l'AIE. Donc devant la COP 30 par exemple, il y a effectivement des positions qui sont prises par ces différentes agences qui ont un rôle, on va dire aujourd'hui complémentaire, peut-être à leur insu d'ailleurs, mais chacune essaye on va dire de tirer son épingle du jeu face aux crises que connaît le multilatéralisme. Je pense qu'elles essayent aussi de montrer un certain dynamisme, surtout pour l'AIE qui peine à fédérer de nouveaux acteurs, de nouveaux pays, notamment autour des énergies renouvelables, puisque l'IRENA, c'est vrai, se montre de plus en plus universelle, et donc la situation est quand même aujourd'hui assez inédite compte tenu du contexte géopolitique aussi, puisque l'objectif de tripler les énergies renouvelables, c'était pas forcément quelque chose qui était prévu par l'AIE ni par beaucoup d'observateurs d'ailleurs. Donc, elle est bien obligée de laisser un peu de côté les énergies fossiles pour suivre un peu le train, essayer de prendre le train en marche. Mais voilà, donc chacune essaye avec ses forces et ses faiblesses de tirer profit, on va dire, du contexte. Et aujourd'hui, clairement, c'est plutôt l'IRENA qui a le vent en poupe du fait de la nécessité de développer les énergies renouvelables pour des raisons climatiques, mais aussi de plus en plus pour des questions de sécurité énergétique.
Bon, merci. Je crois qu'on peut passer aux interventions suivantes et appeler les deux intervenantes suivantes.